Two people walk in the dust of the road between Jerusalem and Emmaus. We often assume this was two men traveling together. However, scholars have speculated convincingly that this was Cleopas and his wife who were traveling to Emmaus. I like the idea because this would show a couple who are committed to spiritual truths. They are equal partners in the discussion, which would not be surprising. They would have seen Jesus conversing with women on theology and had had a good model before them. Right now they are troubled. No doubt the road seems hard and unyielding. The weight upon their hearts drags heavily upon their feet. They had been involved with a great mission. A man had come along, a man of rare spiritual insight. Something about his words had fired their own latent spiritual powers. What a vision of the world he had shared. He had brought God so close to them, or rather, he had brought them so much closer to God. Suddenly, all things had seemed possible. Certainly, they had frequently misunderstood him. They often failed to live in the way he called them to live. At times, he had said and done things that, especially in retrospect, seemed positively reckless. Why did he drive the money changers out of the temple? Did he have to get the Pharisees riled up? What made him think getting the Sadducees angry was a good idea? They got so mad they threw in with their theological enemies, the Pharisees. Did Cleopas and his wife speculate, thinking Jesus was a good man, but he really should have known better than to rattle the cages of Jerusalem's upper crust? And then there was all those teachings about sacrifice and loving one's enemies. Those had been hard even for his disciples to swallow. Yet despite all of this, they had gladly followed him. And those teachings and actions that didn't make sense in retrospect, but still their hearts had clung to him and what he said in any case. Until now. Now there was nothing left to swallow. The last straw had broken the camel's back. A few religious leaders, ticked off at the Galileans' upstart ways, had manipulated the Romans into a crucifixion. Most of his followers had stayed away, but reports had gotten back to the rest of them about the grisly scene. They were proud of his dignity in death. Few, if any, men suffered the cross with any degree of sanity. It was still the end of their hopes and their dreams. Now it was dangerous even to be known as a disciple of the Galilean. This could have been the reason Cleopas and his wife were traveling away from Jerusalem that evening. The only hope they had now seemed to be an attempt to fit back into their lives. The great kingdom of God had shriveled like a grape in the sun. To make matters worse, some of the women who had followed Jesus were spreading strange rumors. They claimed that the tomb of Jesus was empty that morning. They claimed that an angel had said he was alive. Alive? Oh, as much as they wished otherwise, it just wasn't possible. They were rational people. It wasn't possible. The two of them shake their heads sadly. Those women had guts. They'd been among the few who'd waited at the cross. The terrible affair must have unbalanced them. Some of the other disciples had also seen the empty tomb, but no angels had appeared. Perhaps the body had been stolen. I wouldn't put it past the Romans, one of them may have said. Of course, it was difficult to sort out what had really happened that morning. Rumors were flying, and dozens of different stories had been heard by the midday meal. The uproar was so troubling. Why couldn't they just be left to mourn Jesus in peace? Troubled, depressed, sorrowing, they barely noticed when a third man falls in step with them, a third person. But he catches their attention with his professed ignorance over the events of the past 7 days. You mean you were in Jerusalem this week? You don't know what happened? An irrepressible note of comedy enters the picture as they proceed to tell Jesus about his own crucifixion. It's a little reminiscent of Tom Sawyer attending his own funeral. They don't recognize Jesus even when he proceeds to explain everything that had happened according to the scriptures. The good news is walking right beside them, but all they can hear for the moment is the sad, bad, tragic news. The kingdom of God was present, but all they could think of was getting to Emmaus. And then the stranger took up the bread at the supper table and broke it. And in the act they had shared with Jesus so many times, they finally realize who he is. And yet as soon as they recognize him, he vanishes. They race all the way back to Jerusalem to tell the news, only to get upstaged by Peter's story. Finally, they get to explain what had happened to them, but before they can catch their breath, Jesus himself appears. And despite the fact they'd all just been talking about it, the whole crowd is scared because they think they've seen a ghost. One author calls The Walk to Emmaus a masterpiece of comedic timing. I read once that comedy is the unexpected thing that happens. It is the unexpected that turns tragedy into a matter for laughing. By this definition, most events of faith can be a high and holy kind of comedy. The man that the Romans killed on a cross shows up a while later to have a fish fry on the beach with his friends. Cleopas and his wife tell Jesus about Jesus. Can't help wondering if he looked away once in a while to hide a smile. The great Roman emperor gets remembered mostly because a baby was born in a stable during his reign. A widow's only son is being carried to his burial, but they run into Jesus on the way, so the son ends up going back home to supper. No one wants Jesus to roll away the stone to Lazarus' tomb because the smell will be too bad. Then Lazarus walks out, his grave clothes flapping in the wind. I once read a description of Jesus as the world's worst funeral director because he broke up every funeral he went to, including his own. God's comedy says this: even in the midst of dark times, love and goodness still walk beside us. So happy Easter, everyone, and grab hold of the light.